We're all, and we're essentially in that position right now. We're living very much like what we used to call banana republics. In fact, those bank presidents are wearing crowns today. They're getting away literally with murder. I mean, they're getting away with stealing and rape and pillage, and they're being rewarded for it, and that continues to happen. So, yeah, we're already in that world, and it's going to get much worse unless we really do something. And I think this economic crisis we're going through ought to push us on the direction to turn this around. And we do have the power to turn it around. We have the power. The president doesn't. I don't know what's in Obama's mind. Obviously, I'm not a mind reader. I'm not a psychologist. I don't know what's going on with the guy. But I do know that he's in a very, very difficult position. And even if he has the very best of intentions, even if he wanted to do exactly what he promised to do in his campaigns, once he gets in that White House, he gets the laws read to him. Somebody sits him down and says, hey, remember what happened to Martin Luther King? Remember what happened to Jack and Robert Kennedy? Remember. And Clinton, of course, wasn't physically assassinated, but he had a character assassination. And I think he had the shortcomings of one back in his first term.
And they clearly stay there. They clearly do that to weaken them and make sure they're compromised. And clearly Obama's got a lot of skeletons. That's why they like him. He's also very graceful, very intelligent. And after Bush, it's like people want a president they're not ashamed of. John Perkins, stay there. Confessions of an Economic Hitman, #1 bestseller, new book coming out. Talking to a gentleman recruited out of college by the U.S. government to work through private corporations to go in and facilitate the takeover of third world nations, predominantly in Latin America, but it goes on worldwide, by economic means. John Perkins, I want to get more into what's currently happening and how this is just expanding and expanding as they gobble up the entire planet and leave tyranny where liberty was and freedom was and economic freedom was. But looking at the structure, the CIA is declassified. They brag. Other governments do this. MI6 does it. Other intelligence agencies do it. But nobody does it like the United States, obviously. The Russians did it to some extent, using money to get control of nations. But this program of going into third world countries, paying off their leaders, giving them loans at 25, 30% interest, where $1 billion turns into $40 billion, getting the countries to sign over all their infrastructure, then the IMF World Bank documents where they turn the power and water off to cause a riot, so then society really falls, so the globalists can then buy up their stock markets. I mean, this is all on record, and now they're clearly doing it, not on a regional scale, but on an international, global scale. This is really a military system where they come in with the economics first, and as you said, back it up then militarily. After the society collapses, that creates the next crisis. They need to bring in the physical control. Can you speak specifically to the IMF riot?
Well, yeah, probably the best example, the clearest example, is what happened in Cochabamba, Bolivia, a few years ago when the IMF decided that what it really wanted to do was take control of the water system down there. Bolivia couldn't pay off its debts. And, of course, the Bolivian people at the time were saying, we don't really owe these debts. These debts were taken on by military dictatorship before our time. We didn't have any say in it. And those guys are all gone now. The banks shouldn't have allowed this to happen. But in any case, the IMF went in, and they dictated that Bolivia had to basically give its water company in Cochabamba, its third largest city, to the Bechtel Corporation, a U.S. corporation. Bechtel went in and immediately increased all the prices of water. Some people had to pay 4 times what they'd been paying before. The word got out that people couldn't even use rainwater, that they had to pay for that. It was terrible. So there were huge riots. People were dying of thirst, poor people. And they took to the streets. And eventually they got their water system back. And Evo Morales then became president very, very much at the same time. And Bechtel kind of put its tail between its legs and left, only because this enlightened president came in at the time. But we've seen that thing time and time and time and time again on all sorts of levels, where in order to forgive a country's debt, and we never really forgive it, we just delay it, usually increase the interest rates. But in order to even make that happen, we force them to privatize their electric utility companies, their water and sewage companies, their prisons, their schools, their mines, their resources, their oil companies. and sell it to American corporations, or sometimes it's European corporations, time and time and time again. And now, of course, isn't it interesting how we're almost seeing a reversal of that process in this country, Alex, where in fact the private banks are in such dire trouble that the government is going in and bailing them out, and it's stopping short of actually taking an equity position where it really has control over them, but it's getting so deeply involved through these bailouts. So it's really socialization of the corporatocracy, of the people that run our big corporations, of the big corporations themselves. We're socializing them, and we've basically capitalized the poor people and all the failures in the country.
John, I see it as socializing the risk, but privatizing the profit has been said many times, where I really see this as a corporate takeover of the government. I don't see it as a government takeover of the banks, because it's clearly the New York Fed and other private central banks that are running the show globally. They fearmonger, oh my God, we're in this big crisis. You know, they use the derivatives and all the fiat currency and credit they made to buy up the world. Now the bubble's popping, they're using that as a way to terrorize people into giving them even more power. And they're announcing on the news a new bank of the world, and that we'll be paying our taxes to it. But these are the bankers. They're the experts. They know how to run things. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. No, it's government money that's going in to bail out the bankers and other companies, and yet the government's not taking control. It's the private sector that has the control. But it's our money. When I say government money, I mean your money, my money, your listeners' money, our taxpayer money is going in to bail out these guys that took big risks, lost, and now we're paying them off, and they are continuing to have all the power, the corporatocracy, the private businessmen.
John Perkins, quick break, long segment coming up, lots of time to get into detail here. When we get back, I want to ask you, have they overplayed? Is it so obvious and just incredibly arrogant what they've done? Do we have a chance as a world to get the word out about this and bring these people to justice? And then if we do, what do we set up? What's the new system? How do we move forward?